Hi guys, it is time for the first ranking video of 2021. I almost said 2020 there. Today we're going to be ranking my last 10 palettes, trying to hold them all up here. I have 10. I'm excited. I'm a little bit like, this is gonna be hard, but then again, which ranking video hasn't been hard so far? I feel like they're all so hard. This one's going to be hard for other reasons than normal. I feel like in this pile, I have a lot of very mediocre palettes, and I'm struggling a little bit to kind of differentiate them and like saying why I like one less than the other, but the top ones are like pretty standoutish for me. So we're just gonna go ahead and jump in. I think I don't really have anything else to say. If you're new to this, what I do is I basically take all of the 10 latest palettes that I've tried and I rank them up against each other, and just kind of so you can get an idea of what I've really been enjoying and like where they stack up against each other. I don't know, I just feel like it's a fun idea, and a lot of the time, like, these have a lot to do with just my own preferences. Color stories also obviously play a big part in this. Like, a neutral palette is always going to end up lower on my list than something that's like very fun and bright and colorful and something that I really enjoy working with. So just wanted to get that out of the way. I do feel like I'm missing a palette though. Did I not include the Alter Ego palette? Let me grab that one. Maybe we have 11 palettes to rank today. I think we're at 11 actually. Ah, got it. So now we have 11. Now we can get into the ranking. So let's see, what is going to be my bottom this time? I think I'm gonna have to go with this one. And it's not because this is a bad palette at all. This quality is actually really nice, but just because of the color story, it has to end up on the bottom. This is one of the signature palettes from Ofra. They did send me this. This is in the shade, or the palette that's called Luxe, I guess. And you can probably guess why this ended up so low. I did do an Instagram tutorial with this and I really liked it. It just doesn't excite me in the slightest. So I only used it because I wanted to test out the quality. The quality is nice. The color story is so boring that I will probably not reach for this again, but it was fun to try out Ofra's eyeshadows and I have nothing bad to say. So just ended up on the bottom in the 11th spot for that reason. Moving into the number 10 spot, we have this I have not done a video with, but I again did an Instagram video with this using this, and this is the Remedy palette by Beauty by Stoney. They did send me this palette and I do have their first palette and I like it, but this palette just did not do it for me. Color story wise, it's kind of boring, and I feel like all the mattes look so similar. Like this one, 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 they're all just like the same. Like I just don't get this color story. Like, to me, this is a Morphe palette. I know that's really mean, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel like Morphe would come out with a color story like this and people would go crazy because there's like 3 pops of blue. But this palette is very boring for me, and when I used it, the formula just wasn't all that great. It wasn't very buildable. It wasn't super pigmented. You could build it up somewhat, but it took a very long time to work with, and I just felt like the shimmers were super dry, and this exact formula is what I think of when I think of private labeled formulas. And I'm just not really a fan of this. I don't know if this is a private label brand. I would assume so. I'm not going to say that they are because I don't know for sure, but this formula just wasn't really my favorite, and that's the reason why this one ended up being quite low. This next one hurts me to say because I really wanted to like this palette. I wanted to like this palette so much, but I had such a hard time working with this, and this is the new Makeup a Murder palette. This is the Burner Phone. I'll show you what it looks like if you haven't seen it already. I do have a video with that. I will link that in the corner if you want to see it. But man, this was a struggle. Like, this formula is not buildable whatsoever. Like, these perform exactly like neon pigments. Like, this is almost like as if they took their neon loose pigments and just press them into a palette, and like they perform the same. And when I get a palette, I'm expecting to be able to work with it easier than I am a loose pigment. I hope I'm not the only one, but I just feel like this formula is really, really hard to work with, and unless you're someone who likes to do very, very simple eye looks, like the look that I'm doing today is actually something that you could very easily do with this palette because it would work perfectly. But if you like to blend shadows into each other, you like to kind of build them on top of each other a little bit. I don't really build a lot usually. I tend to never use more than like 2 colors in my crease, but if I can't even use 2 in my crease without it getting patchy and being a mess, then I'm just not really interested. Like, at least be able to layer 2 colors. That's all I ask for. Like, that is not too much to ask for an eyeshadow, and I just had a really hard time with this, and I'm not looking forward to using this again, which means that I probably won't. So, you know, if I have such a bad experience with the palette that I don't want to use it again, it just has to end up quite low. But the color story in this one is a lot better than the color story in the first two, which is why it didn't end up like completely on the bottom, because I do really like the color story of it. Spot number 8 is going to go to the Game Beauty Adventure palette. I did get this sent in PR. I will try to mention it when I do get things sent, but sometimes I might forget and I'll put it up on the screen. But here's what the palette looks like, and the reason why this one ended up kind of on the lower side is honestly because it has suppressed glitter, and every time there's suppressed glitter in a palette, it makes me not want to use it as much as it does if it didn't have oppressed glitter, and it just annoys me that it's in there, and I'm just not a fan. I do think that the other shades performed fine when I used it. I didn't have any problems working with them at all. Some of the shimmers are a little bit too lackluster for my liking, but I know a lot of people love that. This shimmer right here, however, is absolutely stunning. It's such a beautiful green. It's like a multi-chrome. It's got a little bit of a purple shift to it as well. It's like a green to yellow to purple. I don't know. It's super unique and interesting, and it has a black base. It's a really, really nice shadow, and I do really love that. And I really like the packaging on this as well, and I'm still very excited to see what this brand does in the future. But because this palette has suppressed glitter in it, I'm just not a fan. So just ended up quite low. Next up, we have the Alter Ego palette that I was talking about earlier. This is the Blooms palette. They did also send me the Canyon palette, which I've decided I'm not going to do a video with because it's just too neutral for me, and I would rather just give it away new. But here's what the Blooms palette looks like. This is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Love palette. I had a really good time using this. Obviously, I don't know how all the shadows perform, and there are a couple of shadows in here that are supposed to be like the cream to matte, which I didn't really know when I first use this because I don't have the Natasha Denona original palette, so I couldn't like compare them, and I didn't know that palette had the cream to mattes. I do know from experience though with the Artemy palette from Alter Ego that the cream to mattes are not my favorites. I don't really love that formula from them, so since there are a couple of those in here, I did have to kind of rank it kind of low, but I do really like the quality of the rest of this palette. I think that the normal mattes and the shimmers in this are really, really nice, and I haven't had any problems with their other, palettes either that don't have those cream to powders. I kind of wish that they would stop with those and just keep it to the mattes, because they do a better job making powder mattes than making cream to powders. But that could just be a personal preference thing, and maybe you have it and maybe you love them. But having tried the Natasha Denona formula, her formula is just so superior that trying to like emulate that, you're just going to fail. And I feel like that's kind of where they're at. So I wish they would just stick to powders because they do a better job at that. Let's move on. Next up, we have a palette that is very similar color story wise, but I like this formula a little bit more, and I just like this brand a little bit more, and this is Glam Light. This is the Pie palette. This came in the foodie box, the Christmas foodie box. They did send me this as well, and this palette is just so cute. I had such a good time using this, and I love Glam Light's formula. I didn't have any issues. Everything performed really nicely. The blush in here is really nice. I like that they're trying something new with their color stories and not just doing a rainbow palette. I think this is a step in the right direction, and I hope they come out with more mini palettes like this. They also have the mini donut palette, which is fantastic. I love that palette. Maybe one day I can do like I need more palettes though, but I want to do like a multi-palette bingo using like the small foodie palettes from Glam Light. Like that could be really fun. Maybe I'll do a multi-palette bingo using all of my palettes from Glam Light. That would be hard. Let me know if you want to see that. That could be kind of fun though. I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. And I kind of have to do it before I get too many palettes, before it gets too out of hand and I end up with like 12 palettes in front of me. Maybe it's time that I do that. Let's see here. What is next? Next, we have some palettes that excite me a little bit more than these other ones. And I think, man, this is so hard because it's not that I don't feel like these palettes deserve to be on top, but they aren't like, they don't excite me as much as other like top 5 palettes in my rankings have. Like the only palette in here that like really gets my heart fluttering is the #1 palette, and you can all probably know what that is by now. Let's see, what is going to be the next palette? This is honestly really, really hard. I think I'm gonna have to go with the one that is on my eyes today. Is that really what I want to do? Okay, I think this is the one. This is going to be the Neon Drip palette from P.O Cosmetics, and I've only used this once, and I don't really have any other reasons why I'm ranking this here other than I had a hard time with the shimmer that I used, the shimmer on my lid. It is beautiful when you get it on the eyes, but like it got hard pan so easily, and I really had to like dig my brush in through it to really be able to get any pigment out, and now it's like kind of sealed here, and I didn't even swatch it before I started, so I don't love the shimmer formula so far in this palette, but of course it's just a first impression. But since I did struggle a little bit with that shimmer, and the other shimmers look to be the same, I can't say for sure, but just looking at them in the pan, they look exactly like they would be the same formula. Don't really know again for sure, but I do really like the palette so far. The matte performed beautifully, the one that I did use. That's really all I can say, but this color story is beautiful. This is an older palette. This came out last year around this time, if I'm not mistaken, and I want to do more with this palette, but I just don't know if I can justify it since it is such an old palette, and I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time on a video that maybe not a lot of people are going to watch. I don't know, I'm gonna have to feel it out, but maybe I'll do like an Instagram video or something with that. Let me know if you want to see that, because I kind of want to play more with this, because this palette inspires me, and I want to test it out a little bit more and just see if I'm correct in that the other shimmers are the same way, because if they are, not the biggest fan, but if they're not, I could definitely see myself like really getting into this palette, because it is a beautiful palette and a beautiful color story. And the matte that I used, like I said, only used one, performed beautifully for being like a neon. So yeah, I'm still excited about that palette, but I just couldn't rank it any higher just because of the sort of mediocre experience that I had using it. Next up is going to be the Gimme Glow Vivid Rose palette, and the reason why this ended up where it did is because I had a really good time using this, but the color story isn't something that I would like gravitate towards a lot. I do like pinks and purples together, but it's not like I prefer something that's a little less monochromatic, if you know what I mean. Like, I like having some more options in the palette. I like having like two different contrasting colors in a palette. So if this had like a pop of green or like a pop of blue or something, a blue would be really fun in here, even though it definitely wouldn't go with like the theme of the palette. But if it just had a little bit of something extra that would make this into not just a pink and a purple look, then I would be a little bit more all about it, because their formula is amazing. I always love all the looks that I do with my Gimme Glow shadows, and yeah, I don't have any complaints per se. It's just that the color story is a little bit too limiting for being like such a big palette. So kind of wish that there was like an extra pop of color or something in there, but I also get it, like with the packaging, it makes sense. Now, you're all going to be very surprised by this, because I said earlier on in this video that neutral palettes are probably always going to end up on the bottom, but in the number 3 spot, is this really the number 3 spot? Wow, go Gimme Glow. This is the Sweet and Sticky palette. This is my kind of neutral palette. I think this is beautiful. I love the tones in this. The tones in this makes it so that even though it is a neutral palette, you get very unique looks out of it, and you can do a lot with this palette. And I love how it goes from very light to very dark in the mattes, and also the shimmers are really like complementary to these other colors in the palette. And I think that this is a perfectly curated sticks pan palette that is very versatile, very user-friendly, just a great color story, and I just think that they did a really good job with this, and I love the look that I did with it. I did like a graphic liner with it, and it turned out really, really, really fun, and I'm just excited to have this in my collection. There's something about this neutral palette that kind of makes me excited about neutrals, which I never thought I would say, but Gimme Glow did that, and I'm very proud of them. In the number 2 spot, I think you're all going to be very surprised again by this, because I didn't give this like a raving review at all, but this is a blueprint palette from Melt, and I kept looking through my palettes and being like, what's next to go and what should be in this spot? And this one just ended up being the palette that I liked more than the one that I just picked like every single time. And I like the color story in this. I like how dark it gets. I like that you can get different looks out of this, and despite me not being like the hugest fan of the shimmers, I just don't think they're very special. They're still fine, you know, like the mattes, they're good, they're fine. I like them, and I don't know, there is something about this palette that just inspired me a little bit more than these other ones. And you guys know, I just love dark mattes, and I think that's the reason why this ended up being so high, because even though it only has two mattes in it, they're very, very dark, and you can get some very nice and dramatic looks out of this. And I did really like the looks that I created with this palette, and I am happy to have it in my collection, even though color story wise it doesn't excite me like the absolute most, but I still think this is a fine palette. But I wouldn't pay, if I were you and I was looking for a like half and half neutral and blue palette, I wouldn't pay $48 for this, but having paid $48 for this and having it in my collection, I'm not mad that I have it, and I do think it's a nice palette, and I can see myself using this again. So I don't know, it just ended up higher up. Like sometimes with these rankings, like I won't rank things before I sit down to film, and I will kind of just take it one palette at a time and be like, which one is the palette that inspires me the least after I've kind of picked out, you know, the previous ones, and then I just kind of take like the least inspiring palette, and that's going to be my next ranked ones. I hope that made sense. But this one just kind of survived every single round, and it ended up being number 2, and I'm just as surprised as you are because I didn't think it would end up that high, but here we are. So for the number 1 palette, and none of you are going to be surprised, but this is the Break the Rules palette by ItsBelCosmetics. This is an all shimmer palette. I've done 2 videos with this, I've done 4 looks with this. I freaking love this. There is nothing I don't like about this palette. These shadows are so beautiful. Go watch my video if you haven't seen it. I'm not going to swatch anything, but these are spectacular shadows. This palette is only $28, which is insane. Such a good price for such amazing shadows. They are planning on restocking this again. They are a very, very, very small startup brand, and this is their first palette. They probably did not know that I was going to hype this up as much as I did, and if they knew, they probably would have been more prepared and made more palettes, but I think I made them sell out twice. But if you want to get your hands on this, just sign up for their emails and follow them on Instagram, and I'm sure that they will keep you posted. They've done a really good job of just keeping everybody updated on restocks and stuff, and I would highly recommend this palette. I wish I had a code with them. Maybe I need to ask them if I can get a code with them so you guys can get a discount, but this palette is fantastic. Don't sleep on this. If it comes back in stock, you've been looking for some special shades or just something a little bit extra to add to your collection, this is it. This palette is amazing, and I'm so proud of them. So that's going to be it for this ranking. Let me know if you were surprised by any of them. Like I said, I was surprised myself by the Blueprint palette being so high up because I didn't expect that. But since the rest of all of these palettes were just kind of mediocre, like nothing that I was like super excited about after having tried them, not just because of color stories, but some formulas were just a little bit iffy, and we just haven't been off to like the best start, if you want, in 2020 when it comes to palettes. Like, they've been fine, but I'm still waiting. I'm still excited for like more fun things to come in, and hopefully some that are a little bit better and a little bit more inspiring. And yeah, that's basically it. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to see my other ranking videos, I will put my playlist up on the screen, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.